an alcohol addict. Um, I, I know we set up this meeting as the God idea with Kathy and I, and Kathy doing the lead. Kathy's probably, because of her schedule, going to be won't be joining us for at least not 6 to 8 weeks. So I'll be continuing for this until she's has an addition, a change in her schedule. Um, so we'll keep the flyer the same, but those of you who are looking for Kathy, she'll be here soon. Uh, okay, we just by way of review, we are in the forward to the second edition. And one of the things that I like to do as I go through this particular section of the book is in the left-hand margin, keep track of the number of members that our little society had. So if I go to page XVII, which is the page that begins with the sentence, it also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic was another. That very first part of the page. In the left-hand margin, I've written June 1935 and the number 2, because that's how many people we had in June of 1935. Underneath the next paragraph, which introduces Bill Dotson, I've written June 1935, 3, because in the same month they went up to 3 with Bill Dotson. The next paragraph underneath it, which talks about when Bill returns after 3 months to New York. At the end of that paragraph, it said the first AA group had actually been formed, and no one realized it at the time. I have written the number 4 and circled that because at that time we had 4 members. We had Bill Dotson, Bill Wilson, Dr. Bob, and Ernie G. The book doesn't spend much time here talking about Ernie G. It does later on in A Vision for You, but that's who we're talking about when it says that they have the group had been formed. There were 4 people. Let's just jump down to the bottom of the page where it says it was now time the struggling groups thought to place their message and unique experience. In the left-hand margin of that, I've written number 40. And then underneath that, I've written April 1939 and the number 100, because that's when the book was published, and we were saying we had 100 members at that point. If we turn over to the next page, you're going to see some significant jumps. In the top half of the page, the paragraph ends with, it was estimated that 800 alcoholics were on their way to recovery. So next to that, on the left-hand margin, I've written end 1939, 800. And here's where the jump really starts to take place. Underneath that, please write it where it says in the spring of 1940, I'm sorry, going down a little bit further, it mentions John D. Rockefeller, and then it mentions the Jack Alexander article. But next to where it says by March 1941, a membership had shot up to 2,000. In the margin, I've written March 1941, 2,000. Now watch what happens. We started the year with 2,000 members. What happened is the Jack Alexander article got published, and by the end of 1941, at the bottom of this paragraph that we're talking about, I've written N 1941, 8,000. We quadrupled in 1 year from 2,000 to 8,000 members. And that's where we're picking up today. The last paragraph on this page, which is XVIII, which, as I understand it, is Roman numeral 18. I did go to school that day, so I know that. Our society then entered a fearsome and exciting adolescent period. I'm going to suggest you underline that. And you may want to circle the word adolescent. Clancy used to say that we may not have had a happy childhood, but we had a long one, because there's a school of thought that we never left our adolescent period. And I'm going to let you decide that on your own in a moment. So let's continue through the paragraph and give you some of the qualifying questions, and then see if you think we've left our adolescent period behind or not. The test that it faced was this: could these large numbers of erstwhile erratic alcoholics, again, let's remember what we're talking about, erratic, basically crazy people, eccentric, generally irregular people, successfully meet and work together? Now, here are the questions. I'm going to suggest you number these. Number one, would there be quarrels over membership, leadership, and money? You don't have to answer it now. Just think about that. Those are the questions that they were facing at the beginning of this adolescent period. Question number two, would there be strivings for power and prestige? Just think about it for a moment. Question number three, would there be schisms? And that just means cracks, divisions. Would there be divisions which would split AA apart? That is question number three. At the top of the page, in the blank area, the top, I'm going to suggest you write in a fourth question. Would there be cliques, CLICKS, comma, gossip, comma, drama, comma, theft, THEFT, conniving, CONIVING, or 13 stepping? Now, I ask you, do we still have these issues today? Do we still have quarrels over membership, leadership, and money? Of course we do. If you don't think we have, you haven't been to a business meeting recently. Would there be strivings for power and prestige? That's a given. Would there be divisions which would split AA apart? Oh, like, say, putting out a book called The Plain Language Big Book, something like that, that threatens to cut us in half. Would there be cliques? Would there be gossip, conniving, drama, theft? I've been around since the early 80s, and I can't tell you, unfortunately, how many groups I've known whose treasurers have just disappeared with the treasury, coffee machine, literature, lots of that stuff going on. So technically, we have never really left our adolescent period. We're still dealing with these issues. And thank God we have our traditions, because it helps us deal with those issues. And that's what we're going to talk about here in a moment. So continuing, I'm going to, as we go through the next paragraph or so, going to see if we can identify what these statements turned into in terms of traditions as we go along. Let me just finish up this paragraph. It said, but out of this frightening and at first disrupting experience, the conviction grew that AAs, and please highlight the rest of this, AAs had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene. And next to that, I've written tradition 1, common welfare, and tradition 5, primary purpose. I'm going to put this up on the screen because I don't know if I ever went over this with you guys. Hang on a second. When I talk about highlighting, so you know what I'm talking about. All right, let me get it screen share so you could see it. I could see it. Now let me get it so you can. I like to use certain key codes, color codes when I highlight, so that if I go looking through the book and I want to find all of the musts, I just thumb through the book and look for the green highlight. If I want to find the pink, I mean, the prayers and the promises, I look for pink. Approach references are blue, recovered references are orange, and everything else is yellow. Now, you don't have to bother with that nonsense. It's just my anal retentive nonsense, but it does help when you're trying to find something in the book and you're looking for something, go by color. So the sentence we just read, which is highlighted in general yellow, but has two highlights in green. AAs had to hang. Had to means must. MUST is not the only way to say must. The book has a lot of ways of saying it, and had to is one of them. So we got two of them here. We got lucky. We got had to hang together, had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene, which refers to two traditions, what became tradition 1, our common welfare, and tradition 5, our primary purpose. Continuing, as we discovered the principles by which the individual alcoholic would live, the steps, so we had to evolve principles by which the AA groups, traditions, and AA as a whole could survive and function effectively. I'm going to suggest you highlight the rest of this paragraph. Take a second to do that, and then we're going to underline a couple of points as we go through it. It was thought that, and please underline this, no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded. And above that, I've written tradition 3. And that's also a kind of a rap against the Oxford groups, because in the Oxford groups, you could be excluded. If you drank, if you relapsed, you were excluded. There was no second, third chances. They also didn't allow tobacco and caffeine. You were out if you got caught doing those things, and we're not excluding anybody. So no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded. We're referring to our third tradition from our society, that, and please underline, our leaders might serve but never govern. Did I hear someone say tradition 2? That's correct. And each group, please underline, each group was to be autonomous. And if you said tradition 4, you got it right. There would be no professional class of therapy. Please underline, no professional class of therapy. Tradition 8. And incidentally, they're not all in order, and they're not all listed here. You may, well, where's this one or where's that one? He didn't necessarily cover them all, and they are definitely not in order. But we're just trying to pick out what eventually became those traditions. That each group was to be autonomous, and please underline, there would be no professional class of therapy. Tradition 8. Please underline the next sentence. There were to be no fees or dues. That's fees, dues, not fleas or Jews. Just want to make sure we're clear on that. It says fees or dues, because I didn't think so when I first heard it. Our expenses were to be met by our own voluntary, and please circle that last word, contributions, not donations. Contributions come from within. Donations come from without. So it's not just a particular choice, an arbitrary choice of words. He deliberately picked the word contributions because we do not accept donations. They come from outside the fellowship. We exist on our own voluntary contributions. There's no membership fees. It's voluntary. There would be, and please underline this, the least possible organization, even in our service centers. And above service centers, I've written tradition 9. Our public relations. Please circle that word public. We're talking about public relations. were to be based upon, and please underline, attraction rather than promotion. And of course, that's tradition 11. It was decided that all members ought to be, and please underline this, autonomous at the level of press, radio, TV, and film. That's tradition 11. Please notice it says at the level of press, radio, TV, and film. And I probably should have prepared this better, but I'm going to put this up for you because it kind of lays it out a little better than I could. All right, now let me get it so you can see this. This is what we're talking about. Imagine there's a line across the page, and the line is the level of press, radio, and films. It says that we ought to be autonomous at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. So there's this line, and everything above it is outside of our anonymity. Mass media, newspapers, magazines, video, internet, social media, YouTube, Flickr, Tumblr, all of these things are considered public media. We don't use our last name in those cases. So I've had a lot of people over the years give me a hard time because I've always used my last name, and they incorrectly tell me I'm violating the traditions, and I'm not, because I'm not at the level of press, radio, and films. I am beneath that level. So once again, we imagine this line going across the page, and underneath the line is where we use our last name, and that's amongst ourselves. Whether it's in a meeting or outside of a meeting, it's amongst ourselves. So the person who uses their last name outside the meeting is violating that tradition. And the person who withholds his last name from somebody in a meeting, in a sense, is also violating that tradition. One is above the line, the other one is below the line. Now, that doesn't mean you have to use your last name. It just means that if you do, you're not violating the traditions if you use it amongst yourselves. How are we to find people if we don't know last names? My sponsor was hospitalized once, and people knew he was at Bridgeport Hospital, but he had people showing up at the front door asking for, you know where Frank the painter is, the guy in AA? Because they didn't know his last name. All they knew, he was a painter, Frank the painter. Obviously, they didn't find him too well. So we had somebody stationed down at the front desk to guide people. But the point is, it's very clear where the level is, where the line is drawn. At that level, press, radio, and film, picture a line. Anything above it is violating anonymity, and anything below it is maintaining anonymity. So let's get back to the reading. It was decided that at the autonomous at the level of press, radio, and film, and please underline, in no circumstances should we give endorsements, make alliances, or enter public controversies. Traditions 10 and 6. This was the substance of AA's 12 traditions that are stated in full on page 561 of this book. Though, and I'm going to suggest you underline and highlight this, none of these principles had the force of rules or laws. They don't have the effect of rules or laws. For one thing, they come from the groups up. They don't come from some hierarchy down. None of these had the principles had the force of laws or rules. And that's because our guidance, our rules come from our higher power as it expresses itself in a group conscience, a well-informed group conscience, I might add. So it says none of these principles had the force of rules or laws. They had become so widely accepted by 1950 that they were confirmed by our first international conference held at Cleveland. That's July 1950. July 1950 is when the traditions were confirmed. Today, the remarkable unity of AA is one of the greatest assets our society has. While the internal difficulties of our adolescent period, and you may want to underline internal difficulties are the things we just read on this page and the previous page, page XVIII and XIX. Those two pages laid out these internal difficulties that he's referring to. While the internal difficulties of our adolescent period were being ironed out, public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were two primary reasons. Please underline and highlight the large number of recoveries and put the number 1 above it, and 2, reunited homes. Why am I numbering them that way? Because number 2 is the tangible evidence of number 1. That's why AA grew as fast as it did. Not just large numbers of people were recovering. The more people recovered, the more homes were reunited. People were put back together. And one person would tell the next person, somebody in their family got help and they should go to AA. And that's what spread the message. Not just that we had large numbers of recoveries. What did those recoveries mean? They meant reunited homes. The same way active alcoholism meant destruction of those homes. Recovery meant reuniting the homes. And those are the two main reasons for the spread, for our successful spread. Though their impressions, these made their impressions everywhere. Please highlight the rest of this paragraph. And before I go through it, I'm going to suggest you for a moment turn back to the first page of the foreword to the second edition. The top of the page says foreword to the second edition, but underneath that, there's squiggly writing, outside the Naugatuck Valley in Connecticut, you people call italics. We call it squiggly writings. But I want to draw your attention to the squiggly writings, because what it says is, figures given in this foreword describe the fellowship as it was in 1955. So the figures that he's referring to refer to the period between 1939, when the first book came out, and 1955, when the second edition came out. So he's talking about a period of time between 1939 and 1955. And I bring it to your attention because Bill mentions it on the very first page of this section. And then it's almost like he forgets about it because he doesn't mention a single statistic until this second to last page that we're about to cover now. So it's easy to forget. These numbers we're about to go through on page XX, at the top of page XX, those numbers refer to the period between 1939 and 1955. So, like I said, I suggested you highlight beginning with of alcoholics who came to AA. Of alcoholics who came to AA, and please underline, really tried. And really tried just means did the work, not just occupied a chair for an hour or so at a time, but actually did the work. Really tried. please underline 50% got sober at once and remained that way. Pretty amazing, huh? 25%, please underline that, sobered up after some relapses. Now, as I said, I'm a graduate of the New York City school system, so it's amazing I can even spell my name, but I do know that 50 and 25 equals 75. So that means that in that period of time, of those people who really tried, meaning who worked the program, didn't just show up and occupy a chair, their recovery rate was 75%. What do you think it is today? I don't think it breaks double figures. Now, what I can't wait to see what the numbers are like once you factor in Zoom to all of this. But we don't have those numbers at this point, and the numbers are not as effective as they were back then. But we'll come back to that in a moment. Let me just finish up what he's saying here. So he said, and among the remainder, please underline, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. Other thousands, oh, I'm sorry, sobered, oh yes, I'm right. And among the remaining, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. Other thousands came to a few AA meetings. Please underline meetings and above it write fellowship. They came to meetings. They occupied a chair for an hour or whatever it was. And that's all they did. They didn't work with others. They didn't inventory. They didn't meditate or pray. They were just taking up a space, getting in out of the cold. So of the thousands that came to a few AA meetings and at first decided, please underline, they didn't want the program. And above that, I've just written, didn't want to do the work. At the beginning of this paragraph, it mentions that those who really tried are those who did the work. Here we're once again referring to them, that we're referring to people who didn't want to do the work. But great numbers of these, about 2 out of 3, began to return as time passed. So they kept that percentage in that 75% range. For what it's worth, give you some other information. In Dr. Bob, in A Good Old Time, is a quote from Clarence Snyder. And Clarence Snyder, you may be aware, is the founder of AA in Cleveland. He actually occasionally takes credit for being the founder of AA, period, because he was the first person to use the name for his group. But be that as it may, on page 261 of Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, Clarence is quoted as saying, and he's representing the Cleveland success rate. He said, that's the trouble. People take it so casually today. I think a little discipline is necessary. I think AA was more effective in those early days. Records in Cleveland show 93% of those who came to us never had a drink again. 93% in Cleveland. Now, one of the reasons to account for that is the personality of Clarence Snyder. Clarence went out chasing people who had relapsed to bring them back in. He almost took it as a personal affront. We don't see that much of that these days, but Clarence was like a father keeping an eye on the kids. If someone disappeared, he went and got them and brought them back. But continuing, he says, when I discovered that people had slips in AA, it really shook me up. Today, it's all watered down so much, anyone can just wander in and out. I think the program is still the same, he said. The principles are there, the steps are there, the practices are there, and the opportunities are still there. So if you do as the big book says, then it is the same program that existed when I came in 1939. So if we are not hitting those kind of numbers, there's obviously another reason for that. And it's because what I think is we get away from basics. We have come up with two fellowships. We have a fellowship of the fellowship and a fellowship of the Spirit. That was never the intention. Remember, the fellowship was named after the book because the book was the program, not the other way around. Somehow we've divided those up, but I don't want to get into a big speech over that. We're all familiar with what we're talking about. Continuing, another reason for the wide acceptance of AA was the ministration of friends. Ministration just means service, help, the assistance, the service, the assistance of friends. Friends in medicine, religion, and the press. And next to that, I'm going to suggest you write, see pages 569 and 572 at the back of the book. And the reason I'm saying that is because page 569 is entitled The Medical View of AA, and 572, is the religious view of AA. So he makes mention of it on page XX, but if you want to know a little bit more about their view of us, many of you may not even know that existed in the back of the book, but it is back there. It's buried after the Lasker Awards and so on. It's back there. You gotta dust off the book to get to that page, but it's there. Continuing. Friends in medicine, religion, and the press, together with innumerable others who became our able and persistent advocates. Without such support, AA could have made only the slowest progress. Some of the recommendations of AA's early medical and religious friends will be found further on in this book. Please highlight this next paragraph. It's only 4 lines long, but let's highlight it anyway. Alcoholics Anonymous, and you may want to underline this, is not a religious program. And above that, I've written, it is a spiritual program. I didn't get the difference for 24 years in recovery. I didn't know that those were two different things. Religious, spiritual, two different things. Religion is a set of principles. You want to belong to our club and worship our imaginary best friend. Well, this is what you have to do. You got to dress like this and pray like this and eat like this and attend temple like this. And there's a very strict set of code of things that you have to follow to be part of the club. As Bill says later on in the book, he mentions God does not make too harsh demands with those who seek him. It's religions that make harsh demands. God doesn't make those demands. The religions make those demands about dressing a certain way, praying a certain way, eating a certain way. Those are religions. Spirituality is a set of disciplines. We need to have a discipline for God. Up to you. You define that. And that also applies to other spiritual terms you'll find in this book. And if that line sounds familiar, it is from later in the book. And he's referring to prayer and meditation. Prayer, meditation, God are all defined by you, by the individual. You can have it your way at Burger King and you can have it your way at AA. It's all up to you. So let's continue. AA is not a religious program. It is a spiritual program. Neither does AA take any particular medical point of view, though we cooperate. Please underline that word cooperate, because it seems sometimes that there are some groups within AA that view the medical community as being the bad guys, that they're not supportive of us, and they may not understand us, but they're not our enemies. They are by far not our enemies. Though we cooperate widely with the men of medicine as well as with the men of religion. Alcohol being no respecter of persons, we are an accurate cross section of, and I've crossed out that next word, and in place of America, I've written the world, because we are. Look around you. Look around you. We got Scott in Cambodia. We got people in Australia. We got people everywhere here. We even have people from Florida. That's what I hear. I understand. I don't know. Cross-section of the world, and in distant lands, the same democratic evening up process is now going on. By personal religious affiliation, we include Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Hindus, and a sprinkling of Muslims and Buddhists. You may want to highlight this next sentence. More than 15% of us are women. Remember, this is in 1959. 1955, sorry. In 2019, women crossed the line and became 51%. So when this book was written, you were 15%. Now you rule the roost. Women rule the roost. 51% as of 2019. Continuing, at present, our membership is pyramiding at the rate of about 20% a year. We're going to come back to that in a minute because it's not quite that as accurate as it sounds. So far, upon the total problem of several million actual and potential alcoholics in the world, we have made only a scratch. In all probability, we shall never be able to touch more than a fair fraction of the alcoholic problem in all its ramifications. Please highlight and underline this next sentence. Upon therapy for the alcoholic himself, we surely have no monopoly. We have no monopolies. A monopoly, according to a 1939 dictionary that I have, is defined as exclusive control of any industry. So we don't have exclusivity when it comes to treating alcoholism. We only have, and he's about to tell us, something that worked for us. Yet it is our great hope, and please highlight the rest of this paragraph, that all those who have as yet found no answer, and I've got that underlined in my book, those who have not as yet found no answer, and here's hope, may begin to find one in the pages of this book and will presently join us, please underline join us, on the high road to a new freedom. Please underline that word freedom. Not relief, freedom. We are not offering relief 1 hour at a time. That's the fellowship of the fellowship. You come in, you get relief for an hour at a time, you go out that front door, and the world hits you in the face again. And you have to come back in 23 hours to get some more relief. We're not offering relief. We're offering freedom. And we have no claim to monopoly, of a monopoly on recovery. I want to go back to something I mentioned a moment ago. I made mention at the bottom of the previous page. It said, at present, our membership is pyramiding at the rate of 20% a year. It has been flat for the next 30 years. Let me show you some numbers here. A little surprising, but I think I might be able to help explain why, if I could find it here. Just give me a second. Now I could see it. Let me make it so you could see it as well. And if anyone wants any of these screen shares that I put up, just drop me a line at thebigbookstudy@aol.com right here, and I'll send you a copy of it. This is the estimated worldwide membership. Let's take a look at 1965 to 1975. We doubled. We went 200,000 to 500,000, from a quarter to a 500,000. And then the next 10 years, from 75 to 85, we went from 500,000, we tripled to 1.445. So 1.5 million. We tripled in those 10 years. First we doubled, then we tripled. 1985 to 1991, the next 6 years, we went up from 1.5 million to 2.1 million. From 1991 to 2023, we have plateaued at 2.1 million. Now, that's not as disturbing as it might sound, because to me, what accounts for that is this. What happened in that area around the 80s and the 90s? What happened is the boom in rehabs, for one thing, but other things happened. The boom in anonymous fellowships. According to World Services, there are now over 200 fellowships in the world currently using our 12 steps. 200. They have records of over 600 requests to use it. Obviously, they didn't all adopt it, but there are still over 200 fellowships using our 12 steps. So whatever their success rate is, however many lives they're saving, those lives are still being saved by the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. You may change the first word in the first step, but to think that we have plateaued for the last 30 years, I think that's not accurate. Alcoholics Anonymous maybe has, but we have had recoveries through Cocaine Anonymous, through Narcotics Anonymous, through SAA Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, Nicotine Anonymous, Marijuana Anonymous, I can go on for an hour. We all know you could name almost any condition, and there's an anonymous fellowship out there for it, and they are saving lives. So technically that should be added to that. But I just wanted to point that out, that when people say that we've plateaued and we haven't really increased, it's not quite that accurate. Okay, let's continue. Forward to the 3rd edition. Where are we? Yeah, I want to try and, we can get this done. By March 1976, when this edition went to the printer, the total worldwide membership of Alcoholics Anonymous was conservatively estimated at more than 1 million. So in the left-hand margin, I've written March 76, 1 million. Surveys of groups in the United States and Canada indicate that AA is reaching out not only to more and more people, but to wider and wider range. Women now make up more than 1/4 of the membership. Now, again, that's 1976. By 2019, you guys broke the glass ceiling. You were at 51%. Women now make up more than 1/4. Among new members, the proportion is nearly 1/3. 7% of the AAs surveyed are less than 30 years of age, among them many in their teens. The basic principles of the AA program, and you may want to highlight this sentence, the basic principles of the AA program, the 12 steps, it appears, hold good for individuals with many different lifestyles. Again, all of those fellowships using our 12 steps. Just as the program has brought recovery to those of many different nationalities. The 12 steps that summarize the program may be called les dos pasos in one country, les douze états, I think that's the way it is, but it sounds nice enough, in another. But they trace exactly the same path to recovery. And you may want to underline that, exactly the same path to recovery, the 12 steps, what I was talking about a moment ago. In spite of the great increase in the size and the span of this fellowship, at its core, it remains simple and personal. Please highlight the next 3 lines. I'm going to suggest you do it in pink because it's a promise. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, what it was like living on self-will. That's what we're talking about, our experience, not what you were drinking, how much you were drinking, what it was like running on self-will. That's our experience. Our strength, in other words, what happened? We had a spiritual intervention. We had a spirit. God happened. The 12 steps happened. And hope, what it's like now running on God's will. I think, one of the things that doesn't necessarily get mentioned here is that up until now, up until Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't even say now, up until Alcoholics Anonymous in 1939, the alcoholic has always been addressed by someone above us, judges, parents, police officers, not here. Here, we are all equals. There's nobody above us speaking down. We are looking eye to eye, nose to nose, at each one of us, our experience, our strength, and our hope. It's a big change. We're not being talked down to anymore. Forward to the 4th edition. This 4th edition of Alcoholics Anonymous came off the press in November 2001, at the start of a new millennium. Since the 3rd edition was published in 1976, worldwide membership of AA has just about doubled. And in the margin there, I've written November 2001, 2 million. To an estimated 2 million or more, with nearly 100,800 groups meeting in approximately 150 countries around the world. Please highlight and underline this first sentence. And you may want to circle 2 words, literature and major. Literature has played a major role in AA's growth. Literature, a major role. And a striking phenomenon of the past quarter century has been the explosion of translations of our basic literature into many languages and dialects. In country after country, you may want to highlight the rest of this paragraph and telling, in country after country where the AA seed was planted. Now, what does that mean? To me, the AA seed being planted means fellowship. Fellowship. Where fellowship started, it has taken root, slowly at first, then growing by leaps and bounds when? And let's highlight and underline when literature has become available. And in the margin next to that, I've written further proof of fellowship versus program. Where we take root is through fellowship, but where we grow is through our literature. Currently, Alcoholics Anonymous has been translated into 43 languages. The first of our literature that we translated was obviously the Big Book. I think we all know that. Anyone want to guess what the second book that was chosen to be translated was? It's not the 12 and 12. It's not Language of the Heart. The second book to go into wide translation, Comes of Age. Now, why is that important to me? Because it tells me that people were hungry for how this thing came about. They've been reading this book all over the world. Now they're asking questions about who are these people? How did this thing happen? They were curious because that's what Comes of Age is Bill Wilson telling the history of Alcoholics Anonymous through three different perspectives, from the perspective of traditions, through the perspective of steps, and through concepts. It tells me people are interested in finding out what this thing is all about. To me, that's fascinating. So whenever people say a lot of people don't care about history, I don't know. Those statistics tell me they do care about history. Let's continue. As the message of recovery has reached larger numbers of people, it has also touched the lives of a vastly wider variety of suffering alcoholics. When the phrase, "we are people who normally would not mix," page 17 of this book, was written in 1939, it referred to a fellowship composed largely of men and a few women, with quite similar social, ethnic, and economic backgrounds. Like so much of AA's basic text, once again, reminding us, same way these forwards began by reminding us that this is a textbook, it's wrapping it up here as well. These words have proved to be far more visionary than the founding members could ever have imagined. The stories added to the edition represent a membership of whose characteristics of age, gender, race, and culture have widened and have deepened to encompass virtually everyone the first 100 members could have hoped to reach. Please highlight this first phrase. While our literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message rather than word of mouth. Remember, the first way our message was carried was word of mouth. But then in the Counting Noses meeting in 1937, Bill and Bob realized that as we were growing, and by that time they had 40, at least according to what they said, a whopping 40 members. They realized that if they continued to rely upon word of mouth communication of the message would get diluted and lost. So they had to put it down on paper. That literature was the way to preserve our message. And that's what we're talking about here. Our literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message, not word of mouth. Sweeping changes in society as a whole are reflected in the new customs and practices within the fellowship. Taking advantage of technical advances, for example, AA members, you may want to underline this, with computers can participate in meetings online, sharing with fellow alcoholics across the country or around the world. Take a look around you. And please highlight the rest of the paragraph. In any meeting, anywhere, AAs share experience, strength, and hope with each other in order to stay sober. You may want to underline that. And help other alcoholics. Let's underline that. Modem to modem. Please underline that. Or face to face. Please underline that. AA speak the language of the heart in all of its power and simplicity. Now, above where it says modem to modem, I'm going to suggest you put the number 3. Underneath where it says in all its power and simplicity, put the number 2 and write by mail. Because remember, a couple of forwards ago, they said they found they could deliver the message by mail. So it wasn't just reliant upon word of mouth, it was by mail. And that's MAIL, not MALE. And then the number 3, modem to modem. So those are the 3 ways our message got communicated. First, by word of mouth. Second, by mail. Third, modem to modem. And I'm going to point something out here that generated a lot of controversy when this book came out. I know that because my sponsor was one of the people who created a lot of the controversy. The sentence says modem to modem or face to face. Now, that phrase would seem to indicate that they are equal in stature, that whether you go to meetings live or you go to meetings here, modem to modem, that they are equally important. And the thought, and I still think it's valid, is that word should not be or face to face. It should be and face to face, because we need both. We need to go to live meetings, to touch the flesh, to get a hug, to say hello, to sit next to someone, to go for a cup of coffee, to sit in a car during after a meeting and talk to a newcomer. We need to touch one another. And we also need this because not everybody can get to meetings. You understand that? So I think if you think about it, maybe it has a little bit of credibility that the word or should probably be and, because we need both, not one or the other. It's not equal in stature. We need both. Excuse me. We're done. Let's turn off the recording.